It's a mixed night as Republicans win both Florida elections, win on voting ID in Wisconsin, and lose the Supreme Court. Senator Cory Booker breaks a record for filibustering nothing, and the left attempts to make a hero out of an illegal immigrant by leaving out his history with MS-13. I'm Tony Kinnett from the Daily Signal's Tony Kinnett Cast, syndicated nationally at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. This is the Daily Signal's top news in 10. Last night was a good night for Republicans in Florida. Both of the special elections to fill Florida's District 1, which was to fill Matt Gaetz' seat, went to Jimmy Patronis. Jimmy Patronis won over Gay Vallimont 57-42. And Florida's 6th congressional, which is to replace former Representative Mike Waltz, that went to former State Senator Randy Fine, who beat out Joshua Whale 56.7 to 42.7. Democrat groups pumped in over $10 million as of the second half of March heading into the race, whereas Randy Fine finished out the race with only $93,000 left in the campaign. Both of those districts went for Trump in the November 2024 elections. It was more of a mixed bag last night for both political parties in Wisconsin, where the right-wing backed requiring voter ID amendment, which would require voters to show photo ID in order to participate in Wisconsin elections, was added to the state constitution with a vote of 61.8% to a no vote of 38.2%, although we did not have more than 59% of the votes tallied at the time of recording this, so those exact figures might have changed. Republicans in the state were in favor of this measure. Democrats were openly opposed to this measure, and that is reversed when you look at the victor of the Wisconsin Supreme Court election, which does appear to be going to Susan Crawford with 55.8% of the vote, and then Brad Schimmel, who was backed by conservatives and libertarians, at 44.2% of the vote. Only 63% of that vote was counted at the time of this recording, so again, those particular margins might change just a bit. And a massive amount of money was spent on the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. Elon Musk and associated right-wing PACs had spent about $50 million on the race, and about the same amount of money was spent by billionaire George Soros and a lot of left-wing PACs and groups. The key reason for the contention over this particular Supreme Court election is that whomever would have won, either Schimmel or Crawford, would have determined how the Supreme Court of Wisconsin would have ruled in the case of how congressional seats were drawn in the state, thus changing possibly 2 or 3 seats in the House of Representatives. Here's House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries stating that Susan Crawford is both a member of the Democratic Party and is also intent on redistricting the House of Representative seats in Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, that's a 50-50 race because we know Wisconsin's a 50-50 state.
Yeah.
And we have a strong Democratic candidate. Whoever wins is going to determine who has the majority in the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Why is that important? Because there are gerrymandered congressional lines right now in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a 50-50 state, as I mentioned, but there are 6 Republicans and only 2 Democrats out of an 8-person delegation because the lines are broken.
Right.
And as soon as possible, we need to be able to revisit that and have fair lines. The only way for that to be even a significant possibility is if you have an enlightened Supreme Court. And so, I think that's an incredibly important race.
Yesterday, Democrats celebrated on social media at the conclusion of Senator Cory Booker, a Democrat from New Jersey, speaking for the longest contiguous amount of time on the Senate floor in U.S. history. The Democrats' Twitter account claimed that this was the longest filibuster in U.S. Senate history, but there's a bit of a problem with that. See, in order to filibuster, or go on a long speaking exposition in order to halt the business of the Senate or a piece of legislation making its way through the Senate, there has to be business to hold up or a piece of legislation that you are filibustering against. And Senator Booker didn't actually protest against anything specific or hold up any particular business. He ranted about Donald Trump and Elon Musk for 24 hours and 19 minutes. Here's a far smaller snippet.
To call to the conscience of this nation, to say, I will not stand for another American to lose their health care for a billionaire. I will not stand for another veteran who's dedicated to stopping the suicide of other veterans to lose their job. I won't stand for the air quality in my community to be made worse because they're letting polluters pollute more. I won't stand for the collective assaults on the Constitution by a man who even the highest judge in our land, a Republican-appointed judge, said stop threatening and bullying other branches of government. When is it going to be enough? My voice is inadequate. My efforts today are inadequate to stop what they're trying to do. But we, the people, are powerful. We are strong. We have changed history. We have bent the arc of the moral universe. And now is that moral moment again. It's the moral moment again.
Democrats have consistently claimed, at least before the November 2024 elections, that they desired to eliminate the filibuster altogether, which would allow a simple 51 majority vote to be the standard for passing legislation in the United States, since the Republicans took control of that 53-vote majority in the Senate. Well, those particular calls have become far more rare. And last but not least, another Atlantic story criticizing the Trump administration accused the Trump administration of deporting an individual who they said was not actually a part of the MS-13 Mexican gang and drug cartel to El Salvador. The Atlantic claimed that the Trump administration had admitted to some kind of a clerical error which had punished this innocent man who was living in Maryland with his wife and his autistic son whom he was on the way to pick up down to the worst prison on earth. Here's Democrat Representative Jamie Raskin making much ado about the situation.
They say those planes were filled with terrorists. I think my good friend from Texas said, well, here's one person of many who wasn't a terrorist on that flight or a gangbanger. His name's Kilmer Garcia. He's a Marylander married to a U.S. citizen who has a 5-year-old son with autism. And he went to pick up his son, but he was picked up first by ICE. And then he was shackled and put on that airplane and shipped off to the torturers of El Salvador without ever having the benefit of those two most beautiful words in the English language, due process. He never saw a judge. Nobody ever told him what he was being charged for. Nobody ever told him that there were any charges against him. And he was sent to a mega prison run by the self-proclaimed dictator of El Salvador. And yesterday, you know what happened, Mr. Chairman? The Trump administration admitted that it had made a mistake. He was not actually a gangbanger. He was not a criminal. It was all a mistake. If there'd been due process, maybe that would have been determined, but there wasn't. But they put him on that plane and he's El Salvador. Well, all's well that ends well, right? No. The administration says there's nothing they can do about it now because he's no longer in U.S. custody. This guy who lives in my state, married to a U.S. citizen with citizen children, he's stuck with the dictator of El Salvador.
There is a bit of a problem with the Atlantic and Raskin's version of the story. That would be that in 2019, a federal judge found that this particular individual was in fact likely to be a part of MS-13. He was placed on a no-fly list, and while a clerical error showed that he may not have been supposed to be deported yet, he was in fact on a list of individuals to deport for known cartel and gang affiliation. The Atlantic left that out. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt responded to these allegations later in the day.
The administration maintains the position that this individual who was deported to El Salvador and will not be returning to our country was a member of the brutal and vicious MS-13 gang. That is fact number one. Fact number two, we also have credible intelligence proving that this individual was involved in human trafficking. And fact number three, this individual was a member, actually a leader of the brutal MS-13 gang, which this president has designated as a foreign terrorist organization. Fact number four is that foreign terrorists do not have legal protections in the United States of America anymore. And it is within the president's executive authority and power to deport these heinous individuals from American communities. It is a promise he campaigned on.
The Trump administration is set to enact a series of tariffs later today, and no one is quite sure of which those are and how far they go and what conditions they come with until they drop. So check the description below to make sure you're subscribed to the Tony Kinnett Cast, and join us tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we'll dig through a few of those together. I'm Tony Kinnett, and this has been the Daily Signal's Top News in 10. Take care.